Pokemon Renegade Platinum is the best Generation 4 Romhack with full gym leader teams, a 12 vs 12 multi-battle showdown, and more. And I'm gonna try to beat it as a hardcore Nuzlocke challenge, but my starter Pokemon and all wild encounters will be completely randomized. As usual, if any of my Pokemon would faint, they'll have to be boxed forever, and I only get to catch the first Pokemon I find per route. Like any other Pokemon journey, this one begins with the choice of our starter Pokemon, except the Pokemon that our starters have been randomized into don't appear in the selection menu, so I'm going in completely blind. This means the only choice I can really make here is which starter to give our rival. I decided to go with Turtwig since it's both the slowest and has a quad weakness, so I felt it would be the easiest to deal with. This brings me to the biggest change, which is that every single Pokemon has had its ability completely randomized, which means this Turtwig could have Levitate, Lightning Rod, or even Truant for all I know. As for my own starter, it ends up being a Magnemite, which is excellent since its steel typing pairs extremely well into the first two gym fights, and we get access to early game Sonic Boom. Speaking of which, we get the broken ability No Guard, which is gonna make Sonic Boom and moves like Supersonic 100% accurate, not to even mention Thunder down the line. We just gotta make sure Magnemite survives that far. Renegade Platinum offers us a ton of awesome gift Pokemon, but I didn't find a good way to randomize these without completely breaking the game, so for this playthrough, gift Pokemon are completely banned. Instead, I'm just gonna have to head to the grass and collect my Pokemon the old-fashioned way. I first head to Lake Verity, where I find one of my favorite Pokemon, Hoppip, which is a mon you usually don't get to use in Sinnoh, so I'm pretty excited to get it. On top of that, it's got Shell Armor, which admittedly is a lot more useful on bulky Pokemon, but it's still one of the best abilities you could ever ask for in a Nuzlocke. En route to Gible, I pass through Route 202, where I pick up a Tyrogue, which isn't necessarily the best Pokemon in the game, but it at least matches up well into the first gym. Route 203 is next on our way to Orberg, where I find a Cherubi, another Pokemon that you don't usually get to use since it's only ever found in honey trees. But with Intimidate as its ability, I'm even more excited to put this thing to use. On our way towards the gym, we can pick up 3 more encounters, and in Orberg Mine, I get a Mudkip. Oblivious, unfortunately, isn't anything to go nuts about, but Mudkip is still a great Pokemon to get. What I did go nuts about, however, is my Route 207 encounter, Gible. This thing is the Scourge of Sinnoh, Cynthia's crown jewel, and we picked it up before the first gym. I'd even argue that Filter is a much better ability than its usual Sandveil. Finally, after picking up a Muscle Band, I find one last encounter in Orberg Mine. Now, I set this randomizer to roughly randomize off of base stats, so getting Graveler is extremely lucky, and getting Download as its ability is extremely luckier. Going into the first gym fight versus Rourke, Gible is our secret weapon. Not only is Garchomp extremely great in the late game, but Gible gets Dragon Rage at level 10, which is super broken against the entire early game. The move always does a set 40 damage, which takes care of most Pokemon below level 15. Sadly, the only Pokemon on Rourke's team that I didn't think Gible could solo is Cranidos, so I'm forced to swap out. Gible is both slower and definitely dead to a crit, so I swapped to Graveler, who should be able to handle this just fine. I guess not, so just like when you don't know what to cook, I'm gonna have to use Cereal as my backup strategy. Despite resisting all 3 of Cranidos' attacking moves, Cereal doesn't have a lot of wiggle room here, and we only have a few turns to make a difference. I didn't know if Thundershock would KO, so instead I paralyze with Thunder Wave and then confuse it with a Supersonic. After Cranidos hits itself once, I swap out into Taco as Cranidos hits itself again. Marshtomp at full HP here is about as good a position as I could ask for. I start by taking out the paralyzed Cranidos, which brings out Geodude. From here, we win in a landslide since most of Rourke's Pokemon are rock ground types that instantly fall to a single water gun. The only thing that doesn't is his last Pokemon Bonsly, but it's a Bonsly, so it stands no chance against Marshtomp, and we collect our first gym badge. To be able to reach the next gym, we've got to do a bit of backtracking, which thankfully I can do on this video's sponsor, Red Magic, a series of smartphones dedicated to providing players the ultimate gaming experience, and they've just released their latest and most powerful model to date, the Red Magic 10S Pro. With up to 16 gigabytes of RAM and the latest Snapdragon 8 Elite processor, this thing is genuinely a little gaming computer that fits in your pocket. The 144Hz refresh rate and built-in liquid cooling system makes it so you can seamlessly game for hours on end. I tried to generate lag in Bloons TD6, but no amount of laggy towers would get me there, and I simply had an awesome time gaming. But what I appreciate most in a phone these days is a great battery life. Throughout a 4-hour session of trying out different games, I started at 73% 50% battery and only went down to 65 with 100 hours still left in the tank in Ultra Power Saver mode. Red Magic is even celebrating this with the 48-hour breakout, so check out the official Red Magic Instagram page to have a chance to win a free Red Magic 10S Pro. If you're interested in gaming on the go with the best specs out there, check out the link in the description or the pinned comment down below, but for now, back to Jubilife City. As we reach Jubilife, Looker acts quite oddly. First of all, he suggests that I don't have any friends, which is super rude and totally not true at all.
I have friends. I definitely have friends. I have friends. I definitely have friends.
Yes, we're all highly convinced. Oh, shut up, Stantler Boy. Besides, the stranger thing is that Looker says there aren't any shady people in Jubilife, which he says about 4 seconds before we find Dawn and Rowan being robbed by Team Galactic 1 block away. After beating Team Galactic and letting them get away, since Looker won't do his job, we can pick up another encounter on Route 204. Anger Point Nidoran is slightly worse than its usual Poison Point, but it's still a really good Pokemon since we can get a Moonstone super early in Renegade Platinum. We next head through Ravaged Path, where we can pick up some great items in the Expert Belt and the TM for Rock Tomb. I then pick up my encounter here, and if you think I've been quite lucky with my encounters so far, let's just say they can't all be winners. Team Galactic is blocking our way to Eterna City, so we've got to fight Mars before we can press on. And just like in base Platinum, the only thing we really need to worry about on this team is Per Ugly. Dealing with the Fat Cat can be a bit of an RNG fest. With 60% accurate hypnosis, you're in for a bad time as she connects. I swap in Twinkie on the Fake Out to pretty much get a free Intimidate. I then swap in Meatloaf, who's taken a bit of prior damage from dealing with Bronzor, and despite dodging the hypnosis as we swap in, we instantly fall asleep the following turn. Meatloaf doesn't end up being completely useless though, since I do land a couple of bulldozers after we wake up. Slowing down the cat is going to be super useful as I switch in Cotton Candy, who takes a huge amount of damage from Facade, but after Leech Seed recovery, I'm not too bothered about it since I know I'm never going to get crits. Based on the previous turn's Facade damage, I shouldn't be able to be knocked out after the Leech Seed recovery, but I go for a Synthesis anyway since I'm not taking any chances. From there, we simply outspeed with a Mega Drain to finish off Commander Mars. Before we can take on the second gym, there's a few more Mons we can pick up. On Route 205, I find a Staryu, which is quite good since, as I mentioned earlier, we can get Evolution Stones fairly easily. After repelling and fighting my way through Eterna Forest with Cheryl, I can finally pick up my encounter of Feebas. This might seem like the ideal encounter since we can pick up a Prism Scale pretty much immediately after, but it does have Stall, which is a pretty serious drawback. The other two encounters we can get before the gym at least more than make up for it. First, on Route 211, where I find a Paris. At first glance, this might seem like a pretty average encounter, but with Drought, it's a top tier pickup. In Mount Coronet, where I picked up my Prison Scale, I find a Murkrow. It may not be Rayquaza or have a particularly useful ability, but it's still a flying type before the Grass Gym. Importantly, I can also pick up a Moonstone to evolve Jello into Nidoking. From there, there's a couple more Pokemon on the team that we need to bring up to speed before it's time to take on the second gym. Gardenia is a big step up from Rourke. We're facing a lot of fully evolved Pokemon here, and frankly, our team is not looking great. Our only real powerhouse is Jello, who I used to set up Stealth Rocks the first turn and can take out Blossom with a couple of Poison Fangs. Unfortunately, Jello's part ground typing doesn't do us any favors here since we take neutral damage from grass type moves, and it cost me half of my health just to take out Blossom. This forces me to switch against Grottle, but Cotton Candy pretty much completely counters it. We quad resist its only attacking move and can't get hit by Bulldoze or Leech Seed. So a couple of Air Cutters later, and we're fighting Roserade. Against an obviously incoming Sludge, I can swap in Cereal, who resists every single one of this thing's moves. With a Quick Claw proc, I even managed to outspeed and nail it with a Supersonic. As Roserade hurt itself in confusion, I was feeling pretty good about my position, until it instantly snaps out and deals almost half to me with a Magical Leaf. Wait a minute, you genuinely thought you could set up on Roserade with your feeble Magnemite. Okay, no need to be rude, Stantler Boy. I'm not doing calcs in this run, so I kinda overestimated Cereal's bulk here. The damage I do with Mirror Shot is basically negated by a Citrus Berry, and I'm forced to swap into Cookie, who does his job like an absolute champ. This gives me a free switch to Murkrow, who I'm just crossing my fingers can survive a Sludge. Yeah! I just barely managed to pull it off, which allows me to take out Roserade. Breloom is next, and while Drill Peck is quad effective, I'm pretty sure a Mach Punch would take me out at that range, so I swap out into Cotton Candy. Breloom gets diced by an Air Cutter, which brings in Tangela, so I swap out into Gabite. Dragon Rage isn't gonna one-shot anything anymore, but it's still our best bet to deal the most damage. After using Stun Spore, Tangela outspeeds and does a lot more than I expected with a Grass Knot. I didn't think that I was just dead to crit there, but thankfully we don't get fully paralyzed and can take out Tangela with a second Dragon Rage. This brings Gardenia down to her last Pokemon Cherim, but my team is in a very compromised position. Everything is at low HP, and my best bet to win is to get Murkrow in for free. At first glance, Jello might seem like the worst choice, but Magnemite and Gabite are too valuable to willingly give up, and Skiploom is just one of my favorite Pokemon. Will I regret this choice? Probably. But for the time being, despite having lost 2 of our comrades, at least we get to live to see another day and collect our second gym badge. The reason it was so important to keep Magnemite around is because the new level cap is 33, allowing us to first evolve into Magneton, which we can conveniently take to Mount Coronet while we're here to instantly evolve it into Magnezone. There's also the Water Stone I got the first time we met Rourke, which I can use to evolve Staryu after it learns Psychic at level 31. With our newest evolutions, Jupiter stands no chance. Starmie demolishes her first few Pokemon, leaving just the Stinker. This thing is normally a menace and potential run ender, but with Magnezone, even a critical hit Night Slash wouldn't be a problem. Discharge just does a crazy amount of damage, making for a super easy victory. Ironically, as I head out of Eterna City to pick up my encounter on Route 206, I get my very own Stinker. I next head to Wayward Cave, where you can normally guarantee to get Gabite, but because we already have one, I'm perfectly happy with Diglett. Wayward Cave also has a Dusk Stone, meaning we can evolve our Murkrow into Honchkrow. And this evolution couldn't come at a better time, since before we reach Hearthome City, we're forced to take on the first member of the Elite Four, Aaron. This showdown is probably the most notorious run killer in all of Renegade Platinum. Getting blindsided by this fight means you'll almost certainly lose, but I came prepared with a plan, and to begin with, things actually went my way. I've given Meatloaf a Pecha Berry just in case Dustox starts with Toxic. Instead, it goes for Protect, giving me a free turn to set up Stealth Rock. After getting poisoned the next turn, I heal it off with my Pecha Berry and lower Dustox's speed with a Bulldoze before swapping in Cereal. Because Dustox tries to Toxic me, I get this switch completely for free and can set up with a Charge Beam as Dustox just heals up with a Moonlight. I then try to set up with a second Charge Beam, which unfortunately doesn't get the boost, so I opt to just take Dustox out with a Discharge. Beautifly comes out next, which is the main reason I set up Rocks to break its Focus Sash. It does some buzzing at me before ultimately getting zapped. Venomoth is third, and it's the last Pokemon I just get to take out for free with Cereal after getting Bug Buzzed. I knock it out with a Discharge, and this is where it all falls apart. Fighting a Scope Lens Drapion leaves a lot up to chance. On top of that, this thing has Swords Dance, and if it sets up even once, Aaron might be hooking us up with a first-class ticket right back to Twinleaf Town. I do my best to get some damage with Nuggets, but ultimately, I can't even take it below half before I'm forced to switch. I pivot through Cereal to be immune to Cross Poison and guarantee we get hit by Night Slash as I send in Meatloaf. A non-crit Night Slash does a lot more than I expected to Graveler. We just gotta survive one more and we take it out with a Bulldoze. No, Meatloaf, not like this. Okay, Hot Dog, it's all up to you. As long as we don't get crit, we might still have a chance. Hot Dog surviving does mean I can take out Drapion with a Dig, but we still need to fight Scizor. This thing has Swords Dance and Priority Bullet Punch, which if we let it set up with, is just game over. I really want to try and keep Dugtrio alive since Priority Sucker Punch against Fantina seems broken, but keeping Hot Dog alive unfortunately comes at the cost of Nuggets. I hope to at least have Taco get in with a Bulldoze, but I seem to be in an arranged relationship with Misfortune. Oh, Marshtomp, you were oblivious to the ways of love. If only you knew how I held you dear. With 3 Pokemon left, I only have 1 at full HP. Drill Peck does a decent chunk to Scizor, but it doesn't compare to the damage we take in return. I wasn't even expecting to survive the Bullet Punch the next turn, but alas, a second Drill Peck is not enough to take Scizor out. During the turn he heals, we can at least get a decent chunk of damage with Drill Peck and then Sucker Punch with Priority to take Scizor below half before losing my best answer to Fantina right before her gym. With my remaining 2 Pokemon at such low health, this is looking like a wipe. I try my best to deal some damage with Hot Dog, but despite all my efforts to keep her around, I end up losing her in the end anyway. I suppose it's only fitting that we lose the first attempt with the first Pokemon of our journey. But Cereal actually survives, and I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse because we just lost most of our best Pokemon to take on Fantina, and while we didn't lose on the spot, having over half of our box wiped out at once could mean we don't have the resources to make it through the upcoming fights. My plan was definitely to rely very heavily on Honchkrow, but at least we can pick up our encounter on Route 208, and a normal type in Porygon is actually pretty solid, especially since we can immediately pick up the upgrade from BB and Hearthome to evolve it into Porygon 2. We also still have some decent Pokemon on the box. Milotic may have Stall, but it's not a very fast Pokemon to begin with. Then there's Skuntank, which at least gives us a single dark type. It's safe to say that my near wipe versus Aaron has me pretty nervous for this fight, but I end up getting off to a pretty decent start, instantly critting Drifblim, taking it out with a Night Slash. This brings in Gengar, which is one of the two main threats on Fantina's team alongside Miss Magus. I don't want to cripple Skuntank for the rest of the game by being burned since it's my only dark type, so I swap in Cereal, who gets burned on the switch and then takes a Shadow Ball before I retaliate with a Discharge. This puts Gengar in healing range, so I can afford to stay in and go for another Discharge to take it back into the red before swapping out into Porygon 2 to dodge a Shadow Ball. Gengar decides to burn me with a Will-O-Wisp instead of going for something like Sludge Bomb here, which would have been a lot better since burn now, damage later is worse than doing damage right away and potentially getting me poisoned. Next we see Spiritomb, which isn't too bad since it's pretty much completely walled by Quinoa. I basically get in a free Dazzling Gleam as Spiritomb goes for Disable, and Quinoa continues to over-deliver with a Quick Claw proc Discharge that crits into taking Spiritomb out. Then there's Banette, who unlike Spiritomb actually literally can't do anything to Quinoa. We're already burned and disabled, so that eliminates half of its moveset. We're unaffected by Shadow Claw, so we can just spam Recover for 5 turns to get rid of its Sucker Punch PP. From there, it's just a free KO. This brings in Miss Magus, and if it sets up even a single Calm Mind, we're probably cooked. At half HP, I decide to stay in with Quinoa to see if I can get in one hit with Discharge and hopefully land a Paralysis. Obviously, that would be way too lucky for me, and after Burn takes out literally half of my remaining health, I'm forced to swap out into Skuntank. After taking a decent chunk from Dazzling Gleam on the switch, Miss Magus does what I feared and sets up with Calm Mind. To make matters worse, I deal way less damage than I was hoping for with Poison Jab. Ladies and gentlemen, you're officially allowed to panic. A +1 Power Gem thankfully leaves me with a bit of HP remaining so I can get Miss Magus poisoned. I optimistically swap to Milotic, hoping to do some recover stalling to deal damage over time with Toxic. On paper, this is a fine plan, I just didn't get it past the randomly generated numbers. This bit of misfortune makes things a lot worse, but because we don't take burn damage when swapping in after a Pokemon faints, we can actually send in Quinoa here to bait anything but Shadow Ball, which allows us to swap in Pasta without getting nuked out of existence. After poison damage, Miss Magus is brought into healing range, so I can get a free Psychic, which together with Poison gets it back to about half before I swap out into Skuntank. Nothing on my team is faster or able to survive a hit from this thing at this point, so I'm sadly forced to sack Stinky Boy. After poison damage, we're one turn away from Miss Magus going down to poison, so I plan to try and at least keep my Pokemon alive. I send in Quinoa again to bait a Power Gem as we swap into Pasta, and thankfully this time we don't actually get crit. With a great sigh of relief, I'm pleased to announce that Dusclops is Fantina's last Pokemon. So I swap in my last healthy Pokemon and get it Leech Seeded, and can then stall it out with Synthesis until it goes down. Surviving that fight required me to squeeze just about everything I had out of my remaining box, but we are still alive. After collecting our third gym badge, I head to Route 209 of Musical Fame, where I pick up a Chimchar. The ability Runaway literally does nothing in trainer battles, so this is just a nerfed Infernape. That being said, Infernape is still one of the Sinnoh All-Stars, so I won't complain. Before we can head towards Veilstone, the game forces us to Route 2012, where my encounter is a Chatot. Here on Route 12, Mr. Backlot's Pokemon Mansion has been invaded by Team Galactic, and there's a multi-battle we have to fight versus Saturn together with Barry. Multi-battles are extremely hard in Nuzlocke since you can't control your partner, and there's no way to tell if they'll actually make good decisions. With a very thin box, I was expecting this fight to be a culling of what remains, but this fight ends up really going in my favor. Barry and I pick off 2 of the Pokemon on the left side pretty much immediately. From there, Twinkie spends what seems like most of the fight sleeping until I have to switch, and Barry just takes out Espeon, which only leaves Saturn on the right side. Once it's down to a 2v1, it's just an easier single battle battle since I've got a partner to help me out every single turn. Every time Barry sponges a hit, I get a free extra turn, and every time he attacks, I just get free damage. This unexpected deathless fight gives me some hope for this attempt. After the fight, I can pick up my encounter in Trophy Garden, which ends up being a Combuskin. Serene Grace doesn't do too much for it, but I'll take the doubled chance to burn with Blaze Kick. From there, I head to Lost Tower, where I get a Quick Feet Makuhita. In Salacion Ruins, I pick up an Eevee, and thankfully, there are a lot more encounters we can get before Maylene. On Route 210, I pick up my third Fire Starter, which I certainly won't complain about since I've got a Drought Setter. This Cyndaquil also has dry skin, making it probably the best Pokemon I've found so far in the run. Just before Veilstone, I pass through Route 215, where I find a Swinub. Once we reach the city, we get access to the Game Corner and thus a ton of useful items that we can get an infinite supply of. We can also pick up a Dubious Disc to evolve our Porygon 2 whenever we want. And speaking of evolving, I make sure to get all of my Pokemon fully evolved, but decide to head south before the gym to pick up my encounter on Route 214, which ends up being a Natu. Xatu quad resists fighting, so I don't mind picking this up right before the fighting gym. On this route, we can also pick up the Choice Band to add to our growing list of powerful items. Finally, we can get one last encounter before the gym in Maniac Tunnel, which doesn't help us out with Maylene very much, but Trico is a fantastic pickup for Wake. Going into the fight versus Maylene, we at least have a decent chunk of flying and psychic types, and some of her Pokemon, like her lead Medicham, are severely nerfed by having their abilities randomized. By losing pure power, Medicham is effectively half as powerful. This makes it very safe for Pasta to take it out with a couple of Dazzling Gleams, which brings out Toxicroak. Because Toxicroak is slower and I could easily just knock it out with a quad effective Psychic here, I really expected it to go for Sucker Punch, which is why I healed up with Recover. For whatever reason, Maylene completely sees through my plan and goes for Poison Jab, which is unfortunate since I can't just stay in and risk going for a Psychic when Poison Jab is on Toxicroak's moveset. Knowing I could have just taken it out with a Psychic right after it came in is obviously pretty frustrating, but instead I have to switch out and send in Twinkie, who does actually survive a Poison Jab, and then swap out into Ribeye to tank an Ice Punch. Toxicroak continues to be unexpectedly bothersome by paralyzing Ribeye with Static, costing my monkey most of its health and making it effectively unusable for the rest of the fight before I can take out the stupid frog. Gallade is one of the biggest threats on Maylene's team, so I figured I'd get one last use out of Twinkie to get an Intimidate drop, but Gallade ends up missing Drain Punch. Fine, Twinkie gets another last hurrah by additionally getting to set up Leaf Blade. However, Twinkie lives up to her name and refuses to expire by dodging a Zen Headbutt. Amazingly, Twinkie gets out of the interaction alive as I swap out into Cotton Candy. And this matchup is oddly comfortable. Because of Leech Seed, I deal continuous damage every single turn and can then outspeed to get back up to full with Synthesis. Because Zen Headbutt does over half to me, I should be potentially dead to crit, but with the Shell Armor ability, there's no risk of that ever happening. Once Gallade is low enough from the Leech Seed damage, I can then just take it out with an Air Slash. Against Infernape, Twinkie actually ends up getting sacrificed to get off an Intimidate drop, because believe it or not, Twinkies do go bad if you set them on fire. This gives me a free switch to Gum, who's holding a Focus Sash, so we just have to hope to not get flinched by Rock Slide. At this point, I'm expecting any and all negative possible RNG to happen to me, so I'm amazed that I even got off a Psychic. Now, you like me may expect Xatu to be faster than Lucario. This was not the case. To make matters infinitely worse, Lucario has Speed Boost, going from being slower than my entire team to outspeeding every single one of them. Alfredo is Focus Sashed, so I am guaranteed to get one hit in here, so it's important to make it count since it may very well be my last meaningful turn. I have two possible options. The first is to go for as much damage as possible, and the second being Chatter to get Confusion. I wouldn't normally bet my life on a coin flip, but when the alternative is certain death, I'm suddenly a gambling man. Based on my luck, this obviously doesn't work out for me the first turn, and Chatot sadly joins its comrades in the great beyond. But it's okay, there's always next turn, we might still survive this. No, Alfredo died for nothing. Even if Cotton Candy survives this Flash Cannon, there's no way I take Lucario out in one hit. Despite everything we've overcome, I'm sorry to say it, but this is it. Jumpluff, 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 you absolute unit! Without the crit there, Starmie just gets outsped and Infernape too, even if it weren't paralyzed. Because Maylene still has Machamp, I'm unfortunately not able to save Cotton Candy. Our hero and savior goes down, but without him, we wouldn't be alive to live and fight another day. Starmie is Life Orb, so I was afraid of losing yet another Pokemon as we take Machamp out, but before level up, we survive with just 2 HP, meaning we've once again lost a huge chunk of the box, but at least we're still in it. There aren't a lot of Pokemon to catch or things to do before the next gym, but I do pick up a Roselia at Valor Lakefront. With download, this thing would be great to fight Wake, but our current box is stacked with Mons that completely annihilate him. Normally, this fight is terrifying since it's in permanent rain, but with Parasect's Drought, we can shift this battle in our favor by setting up permanent Sun. After failing to get a KO with Seed Bomb, I swap into Edamame as Quagsire heals up and take it out with an Energy Ball before Cereal gets to deal with Gyarados. Once Pasta deals with Poliwrath, it's time to reveal my secret weapon. The enemy AI knows to work around most immunity abilities like Levitate, Volt Absorb, or Water Absorb, but for whatever reason, Dry Skin is just completely broken. Getting a Krogunk with Dry Skin is one of the best encounters in base Renegade Platinum, but having it on a fire type that constantly baits water type moves is even more busted. For whatever reason, the enemy AI does not play around Dry Skin even after it sees that I'm immune to water. It just continues spamming water type moves since that would deal the most damage. Dry Skin does take damage at the end of every turn in the sun, so unfortunately for Wake, he just undoes that bit of damage every single turn with his water type moves until I win. Ooh, buddy, don't go in there. I just dropped the Galactic bomb, if you know what I'm saying. After making sure my team is leveled up and fully evolved, I make my way to Celestic Town. Here we can pick up a pair of Choice Specs, one of the best items in the entire game, and after fully evolving Sushi, the very first Cyrus fight is no problem at all. Now that we unlock Surfing, we can reach a few locations to pick up more encounters. I first head to Fuego Ironworks where I find an Ammonite. We're then required to go to Pal Park, meaning we pass through 3 more routes to pick up encounters. First is Route 219, where I find a Delibird, but at least he's fast, I guess. On Route 220, I pick up a Smoochum with Flash Fire, which is a lot better. Finally, there's Route 221, where I managed to find the last fire starter I'm missing in Charmeleon. And I gotta say, Unburden is a pretty big improvement on Charizard's base abilities. At Pal Park, we find Lady Caitlin and her valet, Derek. And frankly, I'm confused. Shouldn't she have a lady's maid and not a valet? And if she enjoys battling so much, why doesn't she do it herself? It's not logical whatsoever.
Oh no, but if I were to search for logic, I should not look for it among the English upper class.
Her ladyship's valet is a very strong opponent, possibly the strongest one we've faced so far. Despite that, we managed to have quite a good fight with multiple amazing matchups. I do admittedly get uncomfortably close to losing Garchomp, which would have happened to either crit or burn from Sacred Fire, but that's a minor detail when we made it through the fight deathless. No need to bring up Espeon, we totally made it through the fight deathless. With Derek defeated, we can finally go to Canalave City, where I first pick up a Frostlass on Route 218. We're then forced to go to Iron Island to fight Riley, but he kinda gets pub stomped by my Sun team. His slacking without Truant is admittedly a huge threat. It's got such insane stats, I'm not even sure a Sun-boosted Flamethrower will take it out, and I'm not here to take any chances. By switching to Popcorn, a Wide Lens boosted Will-O-Wisp burns the big monkey, which allows me enough wiggle room to take it out with a couple of Flamethrowers, so I was right in my instinct that one wouldn't have been enough from Charizard. I make sure to pick up my Iron Island encounter, and I'm not too upset about Drifblim. The next boss we must face is Byron, but as you can see, I've brought my Sunsetter, 4 fire starters, and Garchomp. If you're Byron staring down this team, that's about the worst possible thing that could happen to you, and you're already the worst gym leader in the game. And that's in a game that includes Rourke the Dork, who adds to Byron's shame by being his son. After one-shotting Bronzong with a Specs Flamethrower, there's really only one thing we need to work around on his team, and that's the fact that his Aggron is holding a Focus Sash. I've given my Infernape a Focus Sash to guarantee that we always survive Head Smash, and normally we'd have to go Fake Out into close combat to break the Sash, but because Aggron doesn't have Rockhead due to the Randomizer, we can just close combat it right away. From here, I just need a safe way to send in Charizard, and then I can turn off my brain. My first pivot is into Parasect to set up the Sun. From there, I swap out into Blaziken as Steelix goes for Stone Edge. This consequently baits Earthquake, so we finally found our way to safely send in Charizard. We then simply torch Byron's 3 next Pokemon with Flamethrower before swapping out into Sushi against Bastiodon. With Specs in the sun, I wasn't even sure if Flamethrower would take this thing out, and I really didn't want to get caught with this thing surviving on like 1 HP and taking Charizard out with a Metal Burst. It just seemed safer to go to Choice Banded Garchomp to guarantee we take it out with a quad effective Earthquake. As you might expect, the same team doesn't exactly struggle to achieve the same outcome versus the next gym leader, Candace. After taking out Abomasnow, annoyingly, her Walrein randomly has Sandstream to get rid of my son. I would have had to switch here either way, and with a Focus Sash, we can guarantee Pad Thai survives anyway. Once the sun's back up again, Popcorn is the perfect counter against Walrein since it just keeps going for Surf, after which her remaining Pokemon start dropping like flies to Flamethrowers. It's only versus Weavile we actually have to stop and think. Infernape is the perfect counter here since we can break its Sash with Fake Out and then take it out with a Mach Punch. Before I fought Candace, I did pick up a few encounters on the way. First before leaving Canalave City, where I get a Dratini with Normalize, so that sucks. I also managed to snag a Skarmory outside of Snowpoint, which is a pretty big find. It's next time for the part of Renegade Platinum that everyone dreads, the 12-on-12 multi-battle. I went into this fight with a simple plan: bring the B team. That is, a selection of mons from my box that I hope can get the job done, but wouldn't send me into several months of grief and mourning if I actually end up losing them. Doing any planning for this fight whatsoever, especially without calcs, is nigh impossible. It's just gonna come down to raw skill and a bit of luck, the latter of which, as you know at this point, I'm severely lacking, as further evidenced by my first turn going about as horribly as you can possibly imagine. I get confused, brave-birded, and hurt myself in confusion all in the same turn. Barry seems to be having all the good luck since he instantly takes out one of the Crobats with a critical hit Brave Bird. At least somebody's moving us forward. Once Tangrowth comes in, I swap out into Calzone the Driftblim to eat a Sludge Bomb, and somehow Staraptor just barely fails to take out Tangrowth with a Brave Bird, leading to his demise. Once Arcanine comes in, it takes out Tangrowth, and I double Will-O-Wisp into Crobat, even though I did last turn, since I'd actually rather face a burned Crobat than something new that's at full power. As I swap in Escargot, Arcanine sadly falls to an Earth Power, which brings in Snorlax. My efforts to manage this fight by keeping Crobat alive unfortunately goes awry as it takes itself out with Recoil, bringing out Electivire. Expecting to be Earth-powered by Gastrodon, I swap back to Calzone, and somehow Snorlax survives a Cross Chop. It then continues to impress by doing both over half to Electivire with Body Slam and paralyzing it, making it safe for Calzone to stay in and go for Shadow Ball to take it out, since I now outspeed. Gastro unfortunately eliminates our hero Snorlax, after which I managed to put us in a great position again by burning a physically attacking Bronzong. Barry even decides to be useful and takes out Gastrodon with a Wood Hammer. From here, the plan is to focus down the left side as much as I can, and Barry actually decides to play along. Things do get pretty close as I get both crit by Shadow Claw and hit by Zen Headbutt, but Calzone just tanks it like a boss. Barry and I continue to play in perfect harmony as I switch to Sandwich, and Barry goes for Earthquake, taking down the Sableye and Bronzong super low. The second Bronzong comes out, so I don't have any reason to switch at all, especially expecting Barry to Earthquake. I take the turn to set up Stealth Rock just before Mars sends in Yan Mega, which immediately gets rid of half of its health. After Torterra gets swept up in a Hurricane, I take out Yan Mega with an Iron Head. This brings in Kangaskhan, which immediately fakes out Barry's Heracross. I take out Bronzong with a Drill Run, meaning Jupiter is down to her final Pokemon, Skuntank. And once Heracross takes care of Kangaskhan, Mars is down to just Purugly. She takes care of Heracross with a Fake Out before I finish off Skuntank with another Drill Run. From there, it's only a matter of time until we defeat the last Pokemon, and somehow the B team made it through the 12v12 without losing a single member of the squad. I guess they do be the best. Cyrus then gets stuck in the distortion world, and Cynthia urges me to hurry. I just gotta go back to Heart Home real quick to change up my team at the PC and then go through the entire cave again, backtracking. Sorry, I'm totally ready.
Just go through the portal, you absolute bellend.
I'm totally oh, I don't have strength. Sorry, Garchomp, you're the only one on the team that can actually learn any of these HMs? I'm sorry, buddy. Renegade Platinum Cyrus is something else. Before we fight his personal team, we've got to take on a double battle versus both Dialga and Palkia. These fights are also back-to-back, so you need to have a team you're comfortable bringing for both. My degenerate strategy starts with faking out Palkia so it doesn't get to move the first turn, and then Destiny bonding with Ice Cream before Dialga takes her out. That's one down, meaning we just need to find a way to defeat the bejeweled Phallus Dragon. So I deal some chip damage with close combat before ripping a space-bending Choice Specs Hyper Beam to take out the rest of Palkia's health. This takes us into Phase 2, where leading with Infernape against Crobat isn't that bad. Cyrus's Crobat is choice banded, meaning whatever move he chooses, he has to commit to for the rest of the time Crobat is out. Obviously, his choice is Brave Bird to try and take out Infernape, but Cereal doesn't care about the flying type move and can easily tank a few before taking out Crobat with a Thunderbolt. Houndoom comes out next, so I swap out into Sushi to tank the incoming Flamethrower. Thankfully, I don't get burned and can bury the dog with an Earthquake. Predictably, we see Weavile next, so we swap back to Ribeye to tank the incoming Icicle Crash. Just like Candace's Weavile, this one has a Focus Sash, so we have to go for Fake Out to break it first before we can take it out with a quad-effective Mach Punch. Gyarados would normally mean we have to switch here since it would power us down with Intimidate, but with its ability randomized, we don't get our attack dropped and can just take it out with a single Thunder Punch. Next is Honchkrow, so I swap to Cereal to tank the incoming Brave Bird. Honchkrow is faster than Magnezone and threatens to take us out the next turn with a superpower. We can very simply get around this by just giving Cereal the Choice Scarf to outspeed and take Honchkrow out before it gets to make its move. Cyrus's last Pokemon is his own Magnezone, so I swap out into Sushi as he tries to go for a Mirror Coat and simply knock it out with a quad-effective Earthquake for the win. With Team Galactic defeated, I get some unexpected use out of the Runaway ability against Giratina. From there, I make a beeline to Sunyshore City to take on the final gym leader, Volkner. The guy only really has one obstacle for us, his lead Focus Sash Jolteon. And once Ribeye deals with it, we can just swap out to Sushi and continue pressing the win button. In this case, we're really taking advantage of the randomizer since it removes Levitate from both of Volkner's Rotom. Obviously, I'm running the risk that any of his Pokemon could have been randomized into Levitate, but I end up getting away with it. From here, we've got to take a look at our remaining encounters. On Route 222, I pick up a Munchlax with Poison Heal, which seems absolutely broken. At Lake Acuity, I do find a Rain Setter and Execute, which could be a good option for the Elite Four. On Route 223, surfing towards Victory Road, I find a Magma Armor Drapion, which doesn't exactly grant it any extra utility. Victory Road itself provides me with an Immunity Sableye, which probably isn't good enough to make the cut. To make it through Victory Road, we're forced to pass through Route 224, where I was surfing to dodge trainers and found my encounter Prinplup, who with Levitate is definitely a contender for the Elite Four. The reason we're forced to go to Route 224 is to fight Dawn one last time. This fight and taking on Barry at the Pokemon League are the final two boss fights before we get to take on the Elite Four Gauntlet. I actually expected to have a lot more trouble versus Dawn and was ready to sack a lot of Pokemon since we're so close to the Elite Four. Ironically, I get through the fight without any losses whatsoever, meaning there's only one fight remaining before the end game. I'd even argue that Barry has a much worse team than Dawn. I just end up getting caught against Snorlax after a few curses, which costs me Infernape. I managed to clean up with Blaziken to avoid any further losses, which means all I need to do is decide which 6 Pokemon to bring into the Elite Four. Each member of the Elite Four in Renegade Platinum has 4 possible teams, and there's no way to know which one they're going to use. So we're gonna have to bring our best all-arounders, starting with, well, our starter, Cereal. Steel is just the best defensive type, and No Guard Zap Cannon seems too fun to pass up on. Our second team member is Salad the Download Roserade, who's good even without Download, but I'm hoping she'll be amazing versus Bertha. Popcorn's Dry Skin ability should make any water-type matchup completely free, and it's a great answer to Aaron. There are so many times we've almost lost Sushi, but I'm very glad he's here for the Elite Four since he's a tried and true MVP of the Sinnoh Elite Four. Having Levitate on Empoleon makes Pizza incredibly good, and basically lets it counter anything that would otherwise threaten it with ground-type moves. Finally, we're bringing Bread, who we can pre-poison before entering the Elite Four to have both leftovers and Poison Heal recovery. And with our team selected, there's only one thing left to do. Going into the fight versus Aaron, his normally most threatening team is the one with Flygon, but with a levitating Empoleon, we really don't have much to worry about. He leads with a download Venomoth, but thankfully it gets its attack boosted since Pizza's special defense is through the roof. I go through with my initial plan to set up Stealth Rock despite knowing which team this is based off his lead, and Stealth Rock really only does anything at all versus his Scyther. As Venomoth starts setting up its evasion with Double Team, I swap out into Popcorn, who thankfully hits an Eruption right away to take it out. With a held Choice Scarf, I was hoping to just spam Eruptions here, but unfortunately that's not going to be possible against Armaldo, so I've got to swap back into Empoleon. After seeing Stone Edge, I can safely swap to Cereal since Armaldo's Choice Banded and it won't be able to change up its moves. And I'll say it, No Guard Zap Cannon is about the most satisfying thing I've ever done in all of Pokemon. I'm glad we managed to keep you alive, Cereal. As Pinsir comes out, I swap back into Popcorn to take a close combat and roast the bug with a Flamethrower since Eruption wouldn't be as powerful when we're not at full health. Annoyingly, we can't just stay in and roast the rest of his bugs since Aaron's next Pokemon is Drapion, so I'm forced to swap into Sushi and trade Earthquakes until we take it out. Once Fortress comes out, the coast is finally clear, and I switch in Popcorn on a Bug Bite before roasting it with a quad-effective Flamethrower. Life Orb Scyther is the last Pokemon, and I was a bit afraid of Quick Attack here, but without Technician, I don't think it would take me out, so I just stay in and take it out with a Flamethrower without even seeing the Quick Attack. That's 1 down and 3 to go. The second Elite Four member is Bertha, so this is going to be Salad's time to shine. She leads a Powdon and doesn't even get the benefit of Sand because of the randomized abilities. Download boosts Salad's special attack, effectively putting him at +2 with the choice specs, easily knocking out Hippowdon with Energy Ball. She obviously sends in Gliscor next since it isn't weak to Energy Ball, but Pizza is a perfect counter here since we can't get hit by its ground type moves and have the quad effective Ice Beam to knock it out of the sky. She brings in Rhyperior next, I guess to try and Thunder Punch me, but we outspeed with a quad effective Scald, easily picking up the KO. Because Scald isn't quad effective, I'm not comfortable staying in against Sudowoodo with its super effective Hammer Arm, so I swap out into Salad to get another special attack boost from Download and tank the resisted hit. At +2, we knock out the Sudowoodo, bringing out Camerupt. I swap into Bread to tank the incoming Overheat, which Camerupt just ends up missing, but realizing it also has Explosion, I don't want to risk one of my best Pokemon in Snorlax, so I swap to Pizza. Camerupt is holding a Focus Sash, and once it's at 1 HP, it's way more likely to go for Explosion, so I make sure to go for Yawn before hitting it with a Scald. This works out perfectly, since after we break Camerupt's Focus Sash, we can freely take it out with a quad effective Scald as Bertha heals up with a full restore. Bertha's final Pokemon is Torterra, which is actually a bit of a threat. I tank the incoming Woodhammer by swapping into Cereal and then switch back to Pizza to dodge an Earthquake and get a bit of leftovers recovery. My plan was to continue this process until Pizza was at a comfortable amount of health, but Cereal ends up getting crit and taken into the red, so I switch up my plan, sending in Popcorn on a Woodhammer who I wasn't sure could get the KO from full HP, so I swap out to Sushi against the incoming Stone Edge. My strongest damaging move is Earthquake, hoping to deal just over half damage to take it out with a second one. It ends up falling a bit short, but I realize that doesn't matter too much since Torterra's going for Woodhammer, causing some recoil damage and thus putting it in range of a second Earthquake. Our third opponent is Flint, and he's probably our best matchup throughout the entire Elite Four. I need Choice Scarf on Garchomp to outspeed some speedy fire types, which means I can't quite take out Torkoal in one hit, but because it just goes for Solar Beam, I'm able to just knock it out the next turn anyway. Scarf Typhlosion does outspeed us, but the worst thing it can do is Earth Power, which clearly didn't even matter if it would have crit, after which we tear through his Ace Magmortar until he finally realizes he can just swap in Drifblim. Bread pretty much perfectly counters this thing since we heal back up more from lefties and Poison Heal than he can deal with Hurricane. Flint's final Pokemon is Arcanine, and I want to guarantee it doesn't go for Wild Charge as I switch in Empoleon, so I start by sending in Salad, who's holding a Focus Sash to always survive Flare Blitz. There is the awkward 10% chance of losing Salad to Burn here, but Salad is my most disposable Pokemon, so I wasn't too worried about it. All of this maneuvering around is just to get Garchomp in for free without taking any damage or risking to get Garchomp burned, and losing Roserade would achieve that goal. In the end, I managed to pivot through Empoleon to swap in Sushi on a Wild Charge to then outspeed Arcanine and finish it off with an Earthquake, which means we only have one more Elite Four member to face. Lucian is a super tricky guy. His Alakazam is fast and hits harder than almost anything else. Metagross is super tanky and hits hard. Playing around Gallade's crits is a nightmare, and we've got to do it all as his Mr. Mime with Light Clay sets up screens. This specific team out of his possible 4 is probably the worst for us to take on. Bread manages to get Mr. Mime down into the red and triggering Lucian's full restore. With both of its screens up, I realize my time is better spent sandbagging the screen turns. So I switch it up and start going for Body Slam instead of Crunch. In the end, I think it took the same amount of turns, but by getting that paralysis, I did have full health when taking it out. I'm pretty sure Gallade can just take me out with a single close combat, so I switch out of Bread into Sushi. With Reflect up, this is incredibly risky, but my idea here is that close combat lowers Gallade's defense, which in theory kinda cancels out the Reflect boost. Gallade's defense is pitiful, and its HP isn't much better, so my hope was, despite Reflect because of the defense drop, that a Choice Banded Earthquake would be enough to take Gallade out. If I lose Sushi here, I think I still have a chance, but Garchomp never disappoints, and we actually pull it off. Once Espeon comes out, I swap out into Bread, who eats a Dazzling Gleam on the switch, and even though Aura Sphere is super effective, Snorlax's special defense plus the recovery we have from both Poison Heal and Leftovers is so insane that I'm not afraid to stay in and just solo the Espeon. There isn't a special attacker that Bread is afraid of, not even Alakazam. It'd be a lot worse if this were Focus Blast, but because it's Aura Sphere, we take it on the chin and slack off back to full HP. Without Magic Guard, Alakazam damages itself with Life Orb every attack as well, so Body Slam just takes it out once we attack. I was afraid Metagross would go for Explosion here, so I swap out into Pizza, who resists every other move it can throw at me. It makes no difference whether Metagross goes for Zen Headbutt or Meteor Mash, and eventually I pick up the KO with a Scald. This leaves Lucian with Bronzong, but this is just another Steel Psychic type with the exact same predicament. To put Lucian out of his misery a bit faster, I swap to Popcorn and take out the Bell with an Eruption. After over 60 hours of playing Pokemon Renegade Platinum, I'd actually made it to Cynthia on the first attempt of my randomizer. But you know Cynthia, she could easily erase it all. Much like the Elite Four, Cynthia has 4 possible teams, but on every single one of them, she leads with a bulky special attacker. This means regardless which one we face, we definitely want to counter lead with Bread. Annoyingly, we get a bit of a repeat of Lucian as her Clefable starts setting up screens. Thankfully, it barely does anything with Moonblast, and I'm even able to recover back more at the end of every turn. This makes this an unlosable matchup, and I make sure to stall as many turns as possible to get rid of the screens before taking Clefable out. Lopunny comes out next, threatening to take Bread out with high jump kick, so I swap out into Sushi, who gets faked out on the switch. Lopunny has Ice Punch, so I take the opportunity to swap to Popcorn and barely take any damage. Lopunny then steps on Popcorn, which I'm ashamed to say there's probably a lot of you that are jealous of. Typhlosion barely survives the Mega Kick, and while we don't pick up a KO with Flamethrower, we end up burning the Lopunny, which causes Cynthia to swap out into Milotic for whatever reason. Unbeknownst to Cynthia, this is an optimal matchup for us though, so I decided to just stay in and go for an Earth Power. I suppose she must have known something was up since she instantly swaps out into Garchomp, so I swap out into Pizza to dodge what I thought was the incoming Earthquake, but instead get hit by a resisted Stone Edge. Without Earthquake as an option, Garchomp only has resisted attacks, and Outrage is her highest damaging move. I try to pick up the KO with an Ice Beam, but Garchomp's held Yache Berry allows it to survive. But knowing it's locked into Outrage, I can just stay in and hope it doesn't crit me to take it out with a second Ice Beam. With Garchomp defeated, she sends out Mismagius, so I swap out of Pizza into Sushi. The Shadow Ball does a decent chunk on the switch, but with a held Choice Scarf, I'm able to outspeed Mismagius the following turn, and without Levitate to fall back on, I can connect with an Earthquake, which one-shots Mismagius through its paper-thin defense. Lopunny comes in to take Mismagius' place, and Cynthia immediately full restores, giving me a free turn to Earthquake. It isn't quite enough to take Lopunny out in one hit, but I outspeed with my Choice Scarf the following turn to take out its remaining health. Milotic comes out 5th, so I swap out to Bread to tank the incoming Ice Beam. I follow that up with a Body Slam, which manages to land a Paralysis that doesn't matter too much since I know Milotic has Stall. Now that its strongest move is Hydro Pump, I swap to Popcorn to get a bit of healing. Admittedly, I would have probably been better off just using Bread here since Earth Power barely does any damage at all, and I'm just hoping to get special defense drops. Earth Powering away doesn't exactly get me anywhere, and I keep doing it turn after turn, which eventually just causes Cynthia to full restore. Even after a few special defense drops, drops, once I see rest and run out of Earth Power PP, I know it's time to swap back into bread. It barely takes any time at all for Snorlax to clean up, which leaves Cynthia with her final Pokemon Roserade. Now, it being a special attacker, I could easily wall this thing with Snorlax, but I'd like to end this run with the very first Pokemon we sent into battle. Things initially don't look too good though, as Energy Ball does a lot more damage than I was expecting. I'm instinctively drawn to the dopaminergic allure of 100% accurate Zap Cannon despite it not being my strongest move in the situation. This guarantees to paralyze Roserade, allowing me to outspeed the next turn with another Zap Cannon. I didn't want to risk overshooting with Flash Cannon and taking Roserade into healing range, so I just have to hope that I don't get crit by Energy Ball. After surviving with just 2 HP, we're good to go, launching one last Flash Cannon to take out Cynthia's final Pokemon and end the run. And with that, I'd actually done it. I'd beat a Pokemon Renegade Platinum Randomizer Hardcore Nuzlocke. Having lost so many friends throughout our journey, I was amazed to get through the Elite Four without any losses. But none of that would have been possible if it weren't for the MVP of the run.